Hey guys, Metal Jesus here, and today I want to take another look at the Playdate during its 4th year. Can you believe this was released back in 2022? But I think it's worth taking a fresh look at it. Why? Well, because this thing continues to surprise me and continues to be popular. This thing is wild. And full disclosure, this is not a sponsored video. I paid for all of these games myself. I actually had this video in the works because I've been playing it more than in the past, actually. But here's the thing. When this thing first launched, it was a curiosity, right? We were all kind of like, yeah, it's pretty neat, it's kind of interesting, but, you know, is it going to find its audience? And over the past 4 years, it really has. They now have a catalog built into the device itself that you can browse curated games, and that's got over 400 games in it. Now, the wild thing, though, is that if you go on the public itch.io page, there are over 1,500 games available for this now. And that's because they did something very smart. From the beginning, they allowed people, anyone, to make games for this. They actually have a dev kit on their website that anybody can use and make games for and mess around with. So you and I and anybody can make games for this. And the cool thing is, over the last couple years, you can tell that developers have kind of figured it out, right? Because it's such an unusual device. And the games, in my opinion, have just gotten better. And that's why I've been spending more time with this, because I do think that the games are better. And frankly, there are just a ton of hidden gems on this because so many games are made exclusively for it. So that's kind of what I wanted to do in this video, is give you guys a 4th anniversary update of the Playdate, show you some of the cool stuff that's come out for it, and give you my thoughts as to where I think they should go next if they do a new version of it. Because I've been using this for so long, I've got some pretty strong opinions of things that they can improve on and you know, fix going forward in the future. And the first thing I want to mention is that they have released the 2nd season. So I believe they did that last year. So essentially what that was a package of games that you could buy into. It was optional, but they made it an extremely good deal where you would buy a bunch of hand-picked games and experiences for this device. And there were some really cool ones in there. The first one that really stood out to me is Taria Como, which is this physics-based platforming game where you don't just jump, but you also swing. And you have this helicopter companion that follows you everywhere you go, and you can use it to attach to different surfaces. And then using the crank, you can raise and lower, and then also use physics to swing back and forth and basically solve puzzles and kind of get around the environment. So really cool game, feels great, looks awesome. So yeah, I was very surprised. The next one I was addicted to is called Long Puppy, and this one is so weird, but it's really fun. So essentially you play this dog that every time it eats something, it has the ability to get longer and longer. And the longer you grow, the further you can stretch. And you're trying to navigate these different levels to get your ball that was thrown from your owner. It sounds really weird and it looks really weird, but I'm telling you, this game is so well designed. It's super fun and very addictive. It's hard to compare it to anything else. It's kind of like Snake meets, I don't know, maybe Katamari Damacy or something like that. It's pretty wild. There's a surprising amount of adventure games and RPGs on the Playdate, and they included 2 of them in Season 2. The first one being a remake of the classic Shadowgate, and this is specifically designed for the Playdate. This is an old school first-person dungeon crawling RPG, and it plays really well, actually, and it's cool. I mean, it seems to be the whole game included here, as well as a couple kind of old school traditional adventure games, including Chance's Lucky Escape, and also the Whiteout. And I think that's the one I'm going to start with because that's the one that kind of got its hooks into me. So basically, the Whiteout is, I guess you'd call it kind of like a post-apocalyptic adventure game. And it even has a warning when you launch it that this is a pretty dark and sometimes disturbing game, something that you probably typically wouldn't expect to show up on something like the Playdate. But Very narrative based. You have lots of actions and choices that you can make in this. It's a pretty rich world, very interesting to explore. Not super difficult in most regards, because you're basically just looking for items to use to get through something to, progress the story. But then Chance's Lucky Escape is probably the opposite of that, where you play this really silly adventure game where you play as a dog who is basically considered the luckiest dog in the world, and there's a heist going on, and yeah, I found this to be a very charming game. Another game I want to mention that really surprised me is Tiny Turnip. So you see every once in a while these games where they deal with climbing. Like if you've ever played Astrobot, you know how that there's sections of that have climbing in it. And I got to be honest with you, those typically are not my favorite parts of those kind of games. And so I put this one off for quite a while thinking, nah, probably not going to be for me. I was completely wrong. There's something about the way that this uses the crank and also the controls in general. This is a pleasure to play. It just seems like it's really dialed in and perfect for these controls. Plus, it also has upgrades. And so you have the ability that you'll unlock fairly early on to kind of almost turn into a ball like a Metroid, like Samus from Metroid. And then you can roll around, and there's, much more than that. But yeah, just a really surprisingly well-made game. And again, even if you don't necessarily like these kind of games, you might want to check it out. Here's a game I was excited to check out called Tau. So this is a 360-degree space shooting game that reminds me of a hidden gem I covered a couple of years ago on the PlayStation 1 called Nanotech Warrior. Very unique game on the PlayStation 1, and it's cool to see it implemented here. As you can see by this footage, it's a tubular shooter, and essentially you're trying to avoid obstacles and also shooting at enemies. And the entire game is played just with the crank. It's also a fairly big game. It's got 50 stages, so really fun and unique. Here is Propeller Rat. So this game kind of reminds me a little bit of Balloon Fight on the NES, and also mixed in maybe a little bit of Hero on the Atari 2600. You use the crank to operate the propeller, and you're basically trying to navigate these pretty challenging levels. There's all sorts of hazards that you have to avoid. This is not an easy game, and so if you like your games a little bit more on the tougher side, but also really fun and unique because it uses that crank, there's over 80 different levels here to try to battle through, so a lot of value with this one. Oh yeah, and there's also a bunch of rhythm games on this device too. So this one here is Otto's Galactic Groove. And again, the thing it does here really well is it uses the crank to control where, I guess, your little paddle thing is that, where you have to hit the notes. So, not the most innovative game, but it actually plays really well. And the music in this is super catchy. Another game I got surprisingly addicted to is Dig Dino, and this is not the type of game I would normally spend a lot of time doing, and if you describe this to me, I'd be like, I don't know about that. However, it is addictive, because essentially what you do in this is you go to a dig site and you dig through the dirt trying to find secrets, and that can be coins, trash, treasure, there's artifacts, and also dinosaur bones. And the addictive part of this is that you are always upgrading your equipment, whether it's how long you can dig for, how deep you can go. You get a bunch of power-ups that tell you kind of where the treasure might be. And also there are multiple levels to the dirt. So you always feel like you're progressing in this game. It's wild. Again, a game I normally probably wouldn't play, but here, because it's so simple and addictive, I've put a ton of time into this. Another thing I want to talk about is how the Playdate and the experiences have evolved over time. It's a very simple device, right? It's not a Steam Deck, it's not a Switch, it's a very simple, some would say maybe underpowered device. And despite that, people have been very creative with it.
I'm not in the mood.
Come back next time. We're not feeling it.
No, come on, guys. We should...
The most obvious example of this is Blippo Plus, which is part of Season 2. It was kind of a surprise release, like a bonus release. And essentially what it is, if I was to describe this, it's an intergalactic television broadcast. And so essentially when you launch this, you kind of use the crank to go through the dial and tune in to all these really weird, wacky, funny, sometimes a little bit disturbing broadcasts. And it shows how you can do video on this. And again, it's something that I don't think a lot of people were expecting to see, but it works. As a matter of fact, there are apps out there that you can get that you can convert movies and videos to play on the Playdate. It's crazy and it's really fun to see. But beyond that, you're starting to see true 3D games show up on the Playdate, which again is something that most people didn't think was even possible on this device. But Diora here is a great example of that. So this is a puzzle game that you can use the crank to rotate the screen to get a better view, better vantage point of where to go and what to do. And it's a pretty complex game, actually. It changes up its gameplay and its puzzles and its solutions quite a bit. Another example of this is Trackminia. So this is a, homage to Trackmania, which was a game that a lot of people played on the Wii and also, I believe, the DS at the time. So it's basically, a time trials racing game where the races only last 30 seconds, maybe 40 seconds. And the whole point is you're trying to get the best time possible. Very challenging, but also really fun. Another example of this is a game called Snow. So this is a first-person skiing game on the Playdate. And as you see here, it's got full 3D environments and you control going down the hill. It's got a bunch of different modes here, like an infinite mode. So it basically just lets you kind of go on forever. Plus there are some, versions of this where you're trying to collect coins or trying to, build up your speed, stuff like that. Now, I mentioned in the beginning of this that there are some improvements I would like to see on a next generation of this if they decide to make a Playdate 2.0. I assume they probably are, since this thing is a bigger success than I think most people expected. So hopefully they're working on it. Now, I'm not going to dwell on the screen because it's been done to death. I mean, it's not backlit. It's not my favorite. However, over the years, I've kind of come to accept it. And to be honest, I've started to appreciate the long battery life because it's not backlit. It's kind of wild. You forget in this day of smartphones that brag that they've got all day battery life. Well, guess what? I mean, the Playdate does that easily. And as a matter of fact, in standby mode, I think it lasts for like 2 weeks. It's wild, and it's also really nice. That said, I do have to say that I wouldn't mind the option to get a backlit one if it was, just slightly more expensive. If they do a version 2.0 of this, give people the opportunity to, buy one or the other. Let's put it this way. I don't think Nintendo regrets switching to a backlit Game Boy Advance back in the day, right? I think it was the right move at the time. So I think there's a way that they could do this. Also, I wouldn't mind if the device was slightly bigger than the current model. Now, don't get me wrong, I actually really like the size of the Playdate. I think it's very portable. It's easy to put in your pocket. It doesn't take up much space at all. However, because I'm using it more, because I'm playing more on it, and frankly, because I'm kind of older, I would love to have a larger screen because the games are fun. And sometimes there's text on there that's a little hard to read. And so having a slightly larger screen would be great. I mean, I'm one of these people who I typically buy the largest iPhone when it comes out. I want the extra real estate because I'm using it so much. And so if they decided to do another version of this, I would like to see it just a little bit bigger. If not the whole device itself, then certainly the screen. And I also feel like it could be a little bit more powerful, especially when you're navigating the catalog, because that's where it becomes very apparent. It kind of reminds me of how slow and sluggish the original Switch got after the eShop filled up with a bunch of games. Very similar here, where you go into the catalog and you're trying to browse around, and there's definitely a weight there. And so I assume it's probably the CPU, maybe the RAM that's included, or maybe the Wi-Fi support, or maybe all three, who knows? But in the next version of this, I do think that they should probably add a little bit more horsepower to it, just make it slightly more powerful. Also, it would be very important for a next generation of the Playdate to be backwards compatible with all these games, right? That would be a huge mistake to not do that. And I suspect that they probably would make it backwards compatible, but I just want to throw that out there that, you know, with a device like this and so many games and experiences, you would want the next generation to be able to run those. And I'm just going to throw this out there because I'm dreaming at this point, right? It would be kind of cool to have other colors. Now, I know that yellow is the iconic Playdate color. I get it. But, you know, other companies like Analog have shown us that people will embrace and potentially buy multiple colors when given the opportunity, right? Obviously, keep the yellow. I think the yellow looks great. But in the future, if it's a success, why not have some more colors? I think people would dig it. And then finally, the one thing I wouldn't change, that's the crank. They got that right. It's wonderful. It's so cool to use it. It feels so good. And games that use it, they're awesome. They're unique experiences on this device, and it's what makes it great. So definitely keep the crank. Maybe in a second version of this adds another thing that might be kind of interesting, like maybe a touchpad or something that would complement it and keep the games kind of quirky. But, you know, I don't know, some other, thing that they could add to that, but don't mess with the crank. And so that, guys, is a look at the Playdate 4 years into it and counting. This thing continues to truck along, continues to be popular, continues to thrive, and I'm very happy for them. It's such a cool and unique device. I've said this before. If you are sitting around and you kind of feel like you've played everything, you know, maybe you got a Steam Deck and a Switch and a PlayStation 5, whatever, and all the games feel the same, give this a try. This is something new, something different. And it's better because it is somewhat limited and kind of simple, you know? It's just a unique experience. And so, I don't know. I think everybody should at least try the Playdate who is looking for something different to play. But that's going to do it for me. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for subscribing, and take care.